Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Equalizer. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, Robin, this all starts with Robin, dealing with a missing persons case. A friend is looking for her roommate / best friend, Nia, but the thing is, she's reported it to the police, but, it's a situation of who they are, being black and everything, and from the neighborhood that they're from, that, it's like, for one, it's like the neighborhood they are living, it's like, not to come to police because they're not really going to help you, and it's like, she her friend is kind of falling between the system of the police aren't really giving this the effort they should, so Robin starts looking into it and ultimately finding out that obviously she owed someone some money, but then it turns out that guy didn't necessarily have anything to do with the guy that was asking her about the money, but then the car she got into, it was a car where she had to, obviously whoever it was, she felt safe, but they had blanked out plates by having a sensor or something on it to basically make it so that cameras can't actually read them. And so ultimately what ends up happening is that Robin finds out, they end up connecting this to different cases across different jurisdictions, and women that look just like Nia are all murdered. So we're dealing with a serial killer, and obviously because it's across different jurisdiction, no one's pieced it together, but Robin's saying honestly someone should have. If someone was actually looking at these cases the way they should have been, kind of giving them the attention that they should have been given, a lot of this could have been prevented, potentially. So obviously she turns to the one person she thinks she can to in this circumstances is Dante, and obviously they end up working together in this case. Obviously they had the little flirty back and forth in certain regards, especially later on when they had ultimately showed up at the quote-unquote killer's place, and she kind of used him as a shield, and it was she's like, no, not worried about it. The fact is I did what I did to kind of protect both of our lives, plus I knew you had your vest on and everything. He's like, you are really, woman? Okay. Even later on assuming Harry to hack into his computer at home, but it is this complicated thing of, because obviously a big part at the beginning of the story is that the fact is the DA is now aware of this vigilante, which is not necessarily ironic. I mean, I guess maybe irony is the word behind it, because it's the DA saying if the people find out about there being this vigilante, for one, it's going to undermine the police. Two, it's going to undermine her when she's going for re-election. So it's more so for political gain more so than anything, which is when we kind of met her in the beginning, when it was kind of unraveling that conspiracy and stuff like that, it makes sense in the grand scheme of things, because she kind of made it clear, she ended up doing the right thing at the end, but she was kind of, because she's like, oh, I don't want to take the chance because I could jeopardize my own career, kind of showed you where, and especially when you compare that to Dante, who, in his own way, he's trying to compensate for his dad's issues, his dad being a dirty cop. He's, trying to be as straight and narrow as possible, so he's trying not to give anyone the excuse. So for him, it's normal cops have to be good. He has to be doubly good because of his dad. It's kind of tarnished their name and their reputation, so he has to kind of be above and way beyond reproach, which is complicated considering he works with Robin, but Robin's kind of a vigilante, but is acting outside the law, and for him that could skew things for people being oh, I guess you act outside of the law because you're working with someone who acts outside the law. So it's a whole complicated dynamic, but like I said, it just kind of proves from the beginning, the DA, she doesn't have the best altruistic motives for doing, you can understand the whole aspect of undermining the police, but it seemed more than anything, it's right, this could benefit me by this could ultimately end up undoing my causing issue with my reelection. But once again, I brought her up earlier. The irony is because she's the one that helped Dante help you tackle this case, and she's unaware. She'd probably go extra hard to bury that deeper so that no one could bring any connections between that. But regardless, Robin was able to talk to one of the victims' moms, Miss Howard, and for her it's I'm not about to deal with another cop. You guys pretend like you care. She's I'm not a cop. I actually am here to help. And she came with some information being it's there's my daughter said, yeah, she was 24, and Miss Howard, she was shocked because it's you actually know something about my daughter. My daughter isn't just some black woman that can get lost in the mix of no, you know stuff about my, and it's because obviously she confiding a little bit, Miss Howard confides in her a little bit about oh yeah, my daughter, she'd ride that bike, and we're kind of saying oh, she was kind of a little stubborn, and it's obviously Robin can understand that with her own daughter and everything. So I just thought that was, once again, just showing you like that Robin takes these very personal, that like so many people that fall through the cracks because of the system, Robin is there to kind of fill that gap. And it's like, sadly, like Dante can see the middle ground a little bit more than other people can. And obviously that becomes a little rocky this episode. But initially, like, they find out, like, kind of like this psychology behind the killer, that basically the killer's kind of conflicted with what he does. Hence why when he kills the women, he ends up putting makeup on them because he kind of regrets what he does. Something triggers him to kill them, but then he puts makeup on them because he does value these women in some shape or form, but it's also showing like there's no sexual assault. So like he beats these women to death, does this terrible stuff, but also like he kind of puts them on a pedestal to a certain extent, like he kind of worships them. It's a complicated thing. And initially they end up tying this all back to like all these women, like there was a particular place I think to get loans or whatever like that, and that ends up being the main connection. And it seems like the dude Dante arrests at first, he's kind of cocky at first. He's like, I'm going to get away with this, and this. Because at first he's thinking it's just about the drugs and stuff. But then Dante pushes him about... because what initially started this was like Robin being like, I don't think you got the right guy. And it was interesting, like her thought process, because it's like this dude, like putting coke in his body, like he's like kind of a clean person and he'd never do that. Because obviously they found like vegan food. So it's like he's all about the purity of the body and stuff like that, which psychotic like irony behind it, considering what he does to these women. But obviously Robin was immediately like, this, you ain't got the right guy. But then like Dante points in this case where it's like he didn't really want to listen to her, and it's like, so he ends up questioning the dude. And so, Robin's like, yeah, I'm watching you through the camera. You wouldn't let me into the interrogation room. So, hey, I'm watching. Ask the guy a simple question. And it's like, oh, it suggests a burger joint. And he says like, sure, I want a burger. It's like kind of hinting he's not a vegan. So, but... at the end of the day, he's like, hey, I can't, like, just go willy-nilly with you. The fact of the matter is I need you to, he's like, this is my case and everything. I already arrested the dude, so I've got to go with this. I can't just trust your instincts and your gut on this. So when the time comes, like, Robin kind of investigates more and ends up... I pretty much figured it was the guy from the support group immediately, because as he was exiting, like, she didn't get a look at his face, but I saw, like, his bald head, like you saw it. I saw his head, and it was like, I figured it was him. Just like the complexion and everything, I figured it was that dude from the beginning. And that immediately made me go, oh, that is morbid, because you're in a support group and you're there with one of the mothers of one of your victims. I'm like, that's morbid and twisted. But it's not necessarily because he enjoyed it, like, oh, you don't know I did this. And it's like, in his own twisted way, because we end up finding out more about him. His name is Carter Jacobs. It turns out Carter, like, came from an abusive home. His dad was abusive to his mom. His mom ended up leaving. And it was a thing of, she promised to come back, but she never did. We ended up finding out, like, yeah, like, he would show up at the playground that was kind of a special spot for them. And he'd wait there, like, waited there an entire week, which plays into the, his killing method of, like, he kidnaps him for a week and then he kills them. Hence why, like, obviously there's like a huge clock on, like, well, kind of small clock, a window of, like, at the beginning, like 48 hours looking for Nia, because she had already been missing for like 4 or 5 days at that point in time. So it's a situation of, like, that's where this all stems from, because all the women he's killing are his mom, because, it's like his abandonment issues, lashing out at these women, because it's like, for him, it's like, you remind me of my mom, you promised you were going to come back, and so he kills them, but because they also remind him of his mom, because he does love his mom, it's just this deep-seated hatred associated with it, he pretties them up by putting makeup on it. So, like, it's a thing of, like, his rage consumes him, but then he kind of feels bad and empathy afterwards, because it's almost like, I'm sorry, Mom, I love you, Mom. It's like that kind of rises to the surface. But what kind of puts a wrinkle in this particular case is, the moment Dante saw the way Robin got heated in this case, like, it's just like pointing a gun to him, like, at that point you could tell Dante was like, well, he's always kind of like, she skirted the lines enough of a gray area that he was okay with it, but this was going too far, like her doing what she did. And ultimately they ended up rescuing Nia, but the fact is, for Dante, it's like, yeah, like, he sees, like, Nia's friend thanking her and everything. Thank you for seeing us. And it's like, yeah, because of you, we were able to get to Nia. But it's like, if the dude was in front of me right now, I wouldn't be able to arrest Carter, because you basically tanked all the, like, evidence. So like there would be no true justice at the end of the day. Because I think it stems from, well, there ends up being multiple levels to it. Because for one, Robin's used to kind of skirting outside of the law. With the CIA, is kind of a thing you kind of cut around a lot of red tape, I'm sure, with a lot of the work she did. So it's probably a thing of you kind of never had to worry about the red tape too much. So kind of going about things the most legal way didn't always count with the CIA. So like that training and aspect of that, because also she looks at the law as not being perfect. So it's like, you might have to like go out, not just skirt the line sometimes, you're going to have to full on cross it. But the fact of the matter is you got to do whatever you got to do for the greater good. The argument could be that could also stem from like her days with the CIA as well. But it seems like what's really at the heart of this, because at first it seemed like this case in particular hits her very personally, because obviously at the same time, like, her Aunt Vi is dating and her profile and stuff like that, but she's like, whoa, like, you don't know who's on the other side. Like, people don't present their real self. And even later on has Harry run the dude that like she's really interested in going on a date, and the moment her Aunt Vi didn't call and show, she's like, whoa, maybe something happened. And then Delilah's like, you're tripping, Mom. It's like, Mom thought you got abducted and everything. And while her Aunt Vi is talking, like, you can tell her like she's clenching and she's thinking. I was thinking maybe there was a case that was more personal for her that was kind of similar in this regard. Now, along with like the case she's already dealing with, these women that kind of fell through the cracks, she didn't want her aunt to become one of those women. It's like, no, like, because she had talked about it earlier in the story that like basically there's a situation where like it doesn't, it's like it becomes a thing until it's just like so much can happen until like the death kind of comes to your door, and then it becomes like very personal. So she was talking from a personal angle of just like, all this terrible stuff happens and you really don't take notice of it until it comes to your front door. And, she was kind of worried for her Aunt Vi, and we kind of learn later on what that's about. For her, it's like, Dante's a good cop, but, he stops himself from being great, because it's just like, because once again, and whether he'll realize it or not, his need to be perfect, to be good, to be such like a quote-unquote good boy just because he got to make up for the fact that his dad wasn't one, or at least, was corrupt, and like he's got his own image. Like he feels like he's not just living his life and trying to be a good cop. He's living his life being an extra good cop to make up for like his father's mistakes. So it's like he's got to work doubly hard for that. So it's like you don't kind of push where you should. You don't push as hard as you should in some areas and in some regards, because even like one of the victims, her fiance was accused of killing her, and so he's in jail, and it's like, oh yeah, like my fiance was a homebody, there's no way she'd get in a car with someone she barely knew. But for him, it's like, that's why the prosecutor kind of pushed to be like, oh, it had to be me. And Jonte was like, I understand. He's like, you understand being accused of the woman that you love being killing the woman that you love, having not only your family, her family think you did it, like having your entire life shattered. Yeah, tell me again that you understand, And Robin honestly could, because her entire world was flipped upside down, because the reason why this is so personal to her is because of her dad's case. It's like, my dad was killed and it was treated like just kind of like it just slipped through the system. Like she was like, I was waiting for just one person, anybody, to lift a finger, and I think that's why she like clicks with Dante so much, because Dante would have been that person who would have looked into her dad's case. It's still a situation of, even he's kind of like, he's not a super cop. Like obviously he's going to make mistakes of like, oh, it's something we should have seen. And she's like, yeah, you should have, but because once again they're caught up with the red tape, because like Harry talked about it, there's no centralized place for these cases across all jurisdictions, so they're so separated that like if something crosses multiple jurisdictions, no one's going to piece it together unless you absolutely look for it. You have to have an outside perspective. Everyone's kind of stuck in their zones of their jurisdiction, that there's no cooperation amongst everyone to piece together, because who knows if this could have been stopped sooner. And that's kind of like the point, and so. But for, Mel, she kind of sees through it, being like, he's not just an asset. Because it's like, yeah, he doesn't like the way you operate. The fact is you do good work with what you do. So it's like, why you've never been the type to care about someone else's opinion, but why does it? It's like, because he's more than an asset. It's like, yeah, because Robin legitimately likes him on both a professional and a personal level. Once again, it's because she's like, I recognize him being a good person, but he could be a great cop if he'd stop like just holding himself back in certain regards. And maybe the argument is, that's the thing of like the way Robin is. She's kind of a firecracker with the way she approaches things. So, it's a middle ground, you know. I think is where the conversation has to be, like a middle ground between Dante and Robin in that sweet spot. But it's like, because there's a time and place for Dante, the way he handles things, but there's also a time and place for the way Robin handles things, because she can do things that he can't. Because it's like, yeah, he was always going to be adherent to, once again, being the good guy. Like, he can't screw up, he can't like skirt any lines, he can't tackle that gray area because, you know, reputation and everything. Like I said, he's just too busy trying to compensate for that to kind of be the great copy. Like, once again, that's kind of like Robin's perspective on it. So later on, because Nia was saved, Carter makes this personal and he goes after Dante. Luckily, Dante's sons weren't home at the time, but that's also a kind of a cute moment. Like, she rolls up on his computer and it's like, oh, hey. And it's like, yeah, I'm his favorite son. It's like, and if you met my brother, you definitely know that I'm the favorite son, whether he'd admit it or whether dad would admit it or not. And it's like, how did you get him? Like, he's like, you know what? Never mind. I don't even want to know. And obviously, it's a conversation about, like, kind of like kids and stuff like that. And he'd be like, oh, do you have kids? And she's like, nice try. I even like what she did, like, gave herself like a fake background, because it's like, yeah, you don't want him to be able to take a screenshot and be able to be like, all right, like this direction, and kind of piece it together, you know. I think that's, I mean, but I guess that also shows you like how good she's at covering her tracks, but also having Harry cover her tracks, that even though they have a picture of her and everything, they still can't isolate her. She's got a public enough life where people know her, but like, I guess she's able to cover her digital trail, both physical and digital trail, so well that no one can like tie it back to her identity as Robin. Because even Miss Howard was like, oh, what's your name? And it's like, I didn't even get your name. It's like, yeah, it's probably better that way, you know. Especially now knowing like, oh yeah, the DA is like making a point, but even then, like, she didn't let that stop her. I thought that would have been more of a hindrance in the episode, but I think that kind of just plays more into Dante's story. But regardless, circling back to it, Robin is trying to talk to Carter, because the sad thing is he is kind of a victim that no one, you know, in his particular case, no one did lift their finger like there for him. It's like, someone should have been there for you and maybe we could have prevented all this. But Carter is like, oh, you're just lying to me, like you don't think I see through you. And he's threatening to kill Dante, but she turns away from him because like, that's what you want your victims to look you in the eye, so you're not it's like, I'm giving you one last chance. The moment she was saying that, I was like, it might be. And lo and behold, Mel was nearby and shot him. And he's killed, and Dante is like, leave. Like, once again, he doesn't like the way she handles this stuff, even to the point like later on he talks to the DA and it's like, all right, this doesn't make, he's like, you're right, the father, like, you know, he confirmed the woman that was there that looks like the vigilante. Is like, we were working together, but not anymore. She's a danger to not only herself but also the people she's claiming to help. Like, she skirts that line too much, so it's like, we'll stop her. And she's like, good, I'm glad we agree. And she also makes the point to be like, this could, bringing her in, we could use that relationship because you're pretty close. We could use this as a mean to bring her in. And it's like, oh, the wonders it'll do for your career. You get what I'm kind of getting at? And he's like, right. So it's like, I think she's kind of winking and nodding at like, hey, like your dad's like, you know, career and everything was kind of down the tank because he was corrupted. And it's like, hey, you won't have to worry about that with this big collar. You know, she's kind of, it's going to be a complicated thing, whether, because I think Dante, the way he has that expression, like, he feels bad because he doesn't want to bring Robin in, because he does recognize the good she's doing, what she's trying to do, but for him, it's like, there's a right way to handle things, and there's a wrong way. He believes that she's doing things the wrong way. But obviously, it's also the conversation of, right, oh, so, like, me bringing her in, I'm just going to, like, it's the politics of it. It's like, oh, I'm going to get a better job and stuff like that. The argument could be, maybe if I get a higher position, I can do more good. I have more resources. I'll be able to do a lot more than I can as a detective right now. I mean, to be fair, considering, like, he hit, like, the last DA and stuff like that, that was kind of a shitstorm within itself. I'm sure, like, you know, kind of getting himself in a higher ranking position, he can justify it by being like, I can do a lot more good that way. So I think that becomes an element to the whole conversation. But even he recognized kind of the scumminess of like, right, I'm benefiting from it. But also the fact that she's suggesting that, once again, proves this isn't about justice. It's about political gain and power and everything like that. Like, what it can do for your career and stuff like that. Like, the fact that she's making that kind of like the main point of like, you get what I'm saying? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like, it just makes it scummy. And, you know, Dante is the type of guy that doesn't want to, you know, I think this way of things could be like, yes, I am still doing good. Yes, I'm benefiting from it, but still, it's like, it doesn't sit well with him. So it's definitely going to complicate things. Obviously, him and Robin aren't in a good place, but obviously him trying to use this their relationship to capture her later on, it's going to make things even more complicated. It's going to make them even more adversaries. It's also going to complicate her trying to help people later on because she won't be able to go to Dante. Because obviously they had their little cat and mouse game, and it's fun for now, but eventually it's going to get to the point where lines blur, because there's also the conversation, you know, Robin had with him about, like, how do you, like, separate work, everything you deal with home, and for him it's like dropping off, like, his keys or whatever. It's like he holds that weight in his hand and he drops it, and it's like everything at work is there until he picks him up the next day. It's like, I'm here, I'm present, I'm home, you know. And so we see her do that, you know. It's like, you know, she puts down the key, she kind of sprays, it kind of just kind of like, whoo, like, you know, almost like a woosah type of thing. And so it's like, hey, I'm here, I'm with my daughter, I'm with my aunt, like, I'm present. I'm not going to let the weight of everything else kind of bear me down. So she was able to get justice for Nia. Carter's dead, you know, but still, it's like, once again, it's like, you know, I think that's because I think for, you know, once again, Dante believed there would be a better way. It's like, you didn't have to kill him. It's like, because Robin's like, I gave him a choice. It's like, once again, I think that's coming from her line of thinking, from like her CIA perspective on things. But I also thought it was kind of a cute thing with Harry and Mel, the whole thing of like, oh, like who fell for who first and everything like that. But obviously she admits, like, after their big blow up, like, first, I think, fight or whatever, is where she's kind of like, yeah, I think that I really fell for the guy. And he's like, I knew it. I knew you fell for me first, or whatever, and stuff like that. So I thought that was kind of cute. Because obviously, like, Robin's like, if I can hook anyone up, I can hook my Aunt Vi up with someone. It's like, I got you two together, you know? So she played matchmaker in that particular case. But, yeah, this episode presented a lot of really interesting things. I'm really curious to see where all this takes us, in particular Robin and the Dante dynamic, like what that looks like as the season progresses going forward. After, you know, it was only a matter of time before they kind of hit a bump in the road. Because obviously, once again, I bring the comparison to like a Person of Interest. It reminds me of Carter and Reese's relationship. That's always a partnership I really liked. I always kind of well, because I was about to say, like, yeah, they kind of got together, didn't it? It's been a while, because it was like, because I know, well, I'm about to spoil some stuff. I'm like, if I remember correctly, they did get together. I'll leave it at that. That's kind of a spoiler, but like, I wasn't going to go, I'm not going to go as spoiler heavy as I was going to, because if you haven't seen Person of Interest, once again, you need to watch the show. It's a great show. Once again, I think it still might be, I said this last time, I still don't know if it's on Netflix or not. It was at one point in time, all 5 seasons. It might be on like Paramount Plus, because it is a CBS show. They might have like the licensing rights. And you never know the licensing rights to stuff. It's weird who has streaming rights for stuff like that. Regardless, it's a good show. Wherever you can track it down, digital, on, you know, Blu-ray, whatever the case may be. Watch the entire show. It's really good. Regardless, I went on a huge tangent there, but my whole point is, it just reminds me of the Carter and Reese relationship and dynamic. God, all this talk about Person of Interest, I gotta go watch it now. Like, I've seen the entire series once all the way through. Like, I've seen every season one time, so I kind of get that itch. Anytime I see, like, you know, because I've been seeing Sarah Shahi and stuff recently, and obviously, like, I referenced like Kevin Chapman in the last episode, so I got that itch because I haven't seen the earlier seasons since they originally aired. No, because I binged like quite a bit of that show like all at once. I want to say like the 5th season might have been when I finally caught up with the show, because I was always kind of a little behind on the show. Regardless, tensions and all that aside, let's focus on the Equalizer instead of going on and like on and on and on about the Equalizer. I mean, about Person of Interest. But yeah, like I said, I'm just interested to see where all that takes us going forward. I went on a huge tangent. I apologize. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.